Welcome to ciplantgo, a podcast aimed at introducing people living a plant-based lifestyle in Japan. For this episode, I sat down with Hanna Hakko, a coal campaigner for Greenpeace Japan. Upon meeting Hanna for the first time, her profile directly struck me as very unique. Born in Finland, where she lived until moving to Japan, Hanna developed early on a keen interest for how human societies are impacting the Earth, and decided to work defending our blue planet for the generations to come. The episode starts with a description of Hanna's current job, what she brings to Greenpeace Japan as a foreigner, how they are communicating with Japanese companies and banks, and a summary of her first year on the job. The discussion then addresses the impact of the Fukushima power plant catastrophe on Japanese energy production, the importance of individual and political actions in acting against global warming, Hanna's path to Greenpeace in Japan, her impressions after having lived 1 year in the country, what she enjoys here, her path to veganism, being a vegan in Japan, leading an ethical life and the importance of drawing a line between acting to make the world a better place and nurturing yourself, other jobs that Hanna thought about doing, the health impact of becoming vegan, a typical Hanna day, her take on the future of Japanese and the world energy production, and finally a few rapid-fire questions. Discussing with Hanna was both extremely interesting and very fun. I hope you will enjoy listening to the episode as much as I did recording it. Before diving into my conversation with Hanna, a big thank you to Tracy and the Pink Cow for allowing us to use the space for recording. Despite being a very busy late afternoon for Tracy and her team, as they had to prepare for a party that same evening, they allowed the podcast to happen as scheduled. Be sure to try out their great plant-based options if you are wandering hungry in the Akasaka area. Without further ado, here is Hanna Hakko. Let's dive in then. Thank you very much for being on my podcast.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for inviting.
Oh, sure. You have a very uncommon profile as far as I know it. So you are from Finland, right?
Yes,
yeah.
From Finland.
And you've been in Japan for how long now?
For 1 year.
1 year? Okay, and working for Greenpeace.
Yes, Greenpeace Japan.
All right, so this is already quite uncommon, I think. And can you tell us what you're doing right now as far as like your job at Greenpeace?
Yes. So I'm working as a coal campaigner, and I sometimes hear that campaigner is not really clear what it actually means. But it entails many different kinds of things, including like research into the topic that we are trying to change in the world, talking to like people and organizations who can make decisions about that thing. So, for example, at the moment, I'm focusing especially on coal power plants in Japan, and especially on organizations who are investing money into those coal plants, which means the Japanese banks. So, for example, I've been researching their investments, having meetings with them. We also produce a lot of information for the media, like briefings, what's happening. Also trying to channel information from like overseas, like Europe and US, what's happening in banks there and how the investment policies are changing. So that's my work in a nutshell.
All right. And again, as I said before we officially started this recording, I have very, very limited knowledge in everything related to this area of work. What are you bringing to the table as non-Japanese working here that like a local Japanese, like I don't know if they would have enough workforce, like if enough people would be able to do that kind of job, but let's say that someone else, like a Japanese, if it was a Japanese person and not you doing this job, what's the value you add to this job?
I think I used to do similar kind of work in Finland. So I have a look into what's happening on this issue in Europe. And unfortunately, there are still a lot of people in Japan in this kind of industry that don't really follow what's happening in Europe or America. So there's kind of a gap in awareness of, for example, how serious the climate change issue is at the moment, and what's happening in, for example, those investment policies in other countries. So because I have that ability and access to better follow those trends in the world, I'm also able to channel them here.
Okay.
So I think that's value added.
All right. So it would be your experience working in Europe, in Finland, and also your ability to skim through the data that's not specifically only in Japan, but like data about Europe and the US.
Yeah, exactly. And also connections to people there who we can bring here to discuss those issues. But actually, we would really like to hire more people, more Japanese people to work on this. But so far, hiring has been quite challenging. But yeah, we are always searching for more people to work on this.
Okay. I might go back to that point a bit later, but before that, how is this job working for you and for Greenpeace? Being a foreigner here in Japan can be, I mean, the range of experience is very broad, definitely. But when you have to do something related to business or to big money, etc., right? If you're not Japanese, I would imagine that people who are in charge of like big corporations, banks, etc., would maybe tend to look down on you or discard your opinion or that kind of thing. How does that dynamic work? Have you noticed something surprisingly positive or negative or anything related to this?
I think often it's pretty difficult to tell what they're actually thinking. They are very polite.
Yeah.
But for example, when I have been meeting with the banks, we always bring an interpreter so that they can hear it in their own language, what I'm actually saying. But it is something that we like are always considering, like how will they take it if it's a foreigner. Sometimes it might be a good thing, sometimes it might be a bad thing, and yeah, the language barrier is still there in many cases. But for me personally, it's also kind of comfortable that I can stay, sometimes I can stay in the like behind the scenes a little bit and be doing the analysis and research and that kind of background work. But then our Japanese colleagues will be more the faces and voices who will be kind of the messenger for it.
All right. Yeah, it's a bit what I had in mind. I think you have quite decent, if not a very good level of Japanese, though, right?
No, I don't.
No, you're working on it.
I'm working on it.
Okay. So would the goal at some point in the future to be able to yourself directly interact with those companies or those banks?
I would really love it if I could do that. And I am currently taking Japanese lessons and studying quite a lot every week on it. But I am aware that it's going to take some time. And it's still a little bit unclear how long I will stay in Japan. Yeah. So not sure if I can reach that level in that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay. Then but again, I'm really not aware of the details of this world you're in. But I would imagine that even with the best Japanese skills in the world, some people would still be more open to hearing challenging opinions from Japanese rather than foreigners, especially if those are guys and the foreigner is a lady. And well, there's a lot of things that in Japan are still, let's say, focused on things that we would consider superficial, like gender or like just apartness to a certain ethnical group or whatever. So,
for sure. And then there's also kind of another layer is that I think sometimes the level of trust that Japanese people have for NGOs is still a bit low compared to some Western countries. So even if we might be saying the same thing as some financial institution in Europe, but simply because it's us, an NGO and Greenpeace, who is saying it, it's not taken as seriously. So that's another angle that we are looking into, like bringing those people from financial institutions or like people with actual business background, bringing them into Japan to talk about those issues.
Okay. Yeah. I suppose they are more open to people who are like more like closer to who they are themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like people working in NGOs have usually a very different worldview than people in businesses and banks, right?
Yeah.
So definitely that you're more open usually to different opinions when they come from people who you can relate to
Exactly.
more, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so how has it been going so far, like this year in Japan?
I think, it's really exciting to be working on this. And I'm really happy that even during the last 1 year, there's been a huge change in how, for example, the coal issue is being handled in, for example, the media. Like maybe a year and a half ago, there wasn't much coverage about coal and coal investments in Japanese media, but currently there's quite a lot. So actually it's been like very surprising even for me how quickly it has changed. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen this year. There are some key things happening this year, like the G20 summit in Japan, for the first time happening in Japan in Osaka this summer. And interestingly, Prime Minister Abe has been saying that he wants to bring climate as one of the top agenda for that summit this summer. So very interesting to see what kind of discussions will take place and will it lead to actual like policy changes? Because currently the Japanese policies are still in support of using coal. So we are of course hoping to see that change. So exciting to see if something will happen on that this year.
All right, I see. So you have actually, is it colleagues of yours that are like skimming through the newspaper and everything in Japanese, I suppose? Yeah. I see. And so obviously since like, it's been 8 years, right? 8 years ago, like with the shift from mostly nuclear to mostly not nuclear, electricity production in Japan after the Fukushima disaster, the official policy regarding energy production has been, I followed a bit the news for a few years because I just arrived in Japan 6 months after the event, and that was 6 extra months after the original, like I was supposed to be here in April 2011, and I just postponed 6 months to see how it would unfold. And a lot of people, like, we still hear about people who are struggling in their daily lives after everything related to the earthquake, the tsunami, and etc., and the regulations like with the radioactive falls. But not a lot of, I think, people are aware that the government still heavily funds TEPCO or like, well, I don't know about others, but like without any interest rate, etc. To like the amount of money is crazy. Just look at the numbers, you don't even know what it represents really. But just to say that it looks like an unsolvable puzzle in a lot of like ways, and it's understandable that the options available to produce energy after that disaster were limited, right? And And so how has coal been used, as far as you know, in Japan before and then after that incident?
So when Fukushima happened, Japan started actually using a lot of gas first. So coal came into the picture or started going up a little bit slower. But currently a lot of electric companies are still planning new coal plants and building them and hoping to build new ones. And it's really like different to any other developed country in the world. Japan is actually the only G7 country that is building new coal plants. So it's really going against the global trends. And yeah, I noticed that there's a lot of distrust for renewables in Japan still. And it's true that it's still a bit more expensive in Japan than in many other countries. And I think one reason is that the investment in renewables has been slower than in many other countries. So kind of the good effects of getting to a higher scale are not yet helping getting the price down. But there are also positive trends in the price development of renewables, so I'm hoping that it will start changing soon. But then it's not only about the production side, but also about the consumption. When Fukushima happened, people took a lot of effort into decreasing their energy use. But when I've discussed with Japanese people, many are saying that a lot of people are now kind of forgetting about it. So energy use has been going up slowly again. But I think there would be more possibilities still to invest in energy efficiency, but also change in people's lifestyles to use less electricity.
I see. So I just happened to have listened to a podcast that was centered around climate change. I don't remember exactly the guest, but it was on I don't know if you know Vox as a news platform. And so Ezra Klein, the guy behind Vox, has a show. It's called the Ezra Klein Show. I listened to Life After Climate Change with David Wallace Wells. I don't know if you've heard of that person. It wasn't Ezra Klein doing the show, surprisingly enough, another person from Vox. And I'm bringing this up because, so Ezra Klein, in recent years, turned vegan. And he's more or less bringing it up on his show, very carefully though. And the guys who were talking about the climate issue they didn't discuss at all that aspect of things. And granted, there's many layers to everything related to what impacts climate change. And they were like on this show I just happened to listen. They were more like advocating for change through policies and governments and like everything related to politics, and individual action being very, very minor, if not totally inefficient. And so all of this to me, since my own choice of being vegan is not related directly to the environment first, but I'm still happy that I can say I'm more helpful towards the cause than someone who still eats meat, for example, right? What's your take on this? And personally, and maybe, I don't know, maybe Greenpeace takes on this related to this problem, because you just talked about how Japanese people would not be trying to spend like less like electricity, etc. nowadays.
Yeah, I think when we look at the current state of climate science and the messages that came out last year from the IPCC report, I think the situation with climate change is so serious, and the need to decrease emissions is so urgent that we don't really have much time anymore for the debate whether it's political action or individual action. I think we need everything. So I think it's, I sometimes hear people saying that it's only political action that matters, or political action is not going to get anywhere if we don't do those individual actions. But I don't really see the choice between those, or we don't have the space or time anymore to choose. So basically, we just have to do everything that we can.
All right, that's an interesting opinion. I wasn't expecting this. The reason being, from a pure logical point of view, I would think that if, like, human beings being usually wanting to do good rather than bad, most people at least, if you put them in the right environment with the right set of rules and the right, let's say, opportunities, right, they will rather choose what goes towards less carbon footprint than more, right? If it, all things being the same, right? Now, all things are not the same, but I would argue like policies enforcing people to do things a certain way rather than leaving that choice to them would definitely help the cause more than just a few more people choosing to not use a car or not fly, etc., right? So although I understand your point of view and I would agree that we want to do as much as we can, from a pure logical point of view, I would say like maybe policy and everything related to top-down approaches is more, is like you can't get past this problem or tackle this problem without those policies. But you could do a lot already without general, like, let's say, individual people choosing to change their life despite the trend.
Yeah, and if I had to choose between like political action and individual action trying to change your lifestyles, I would choose political. And I think there's a huge difference in the scale of effect or scale of impact that you can expect from different kinds of activities. So if a person is thinking, okay, I want to do something about climate change, then I will definitely recommend them to get organized, get involved in political or like NGO campaigns, rather than worry too much about how they are recycling, for example. So yeah, there's a big scale in there.
All right, so it's more like a spectrum, and basically the most bang for your buck would be in the realm of everything related to politics, like pressuring groups and things like that. I see. I love to continue on this topic, but I think that by now, both me and the listeners maybe are curious about how you came to be working for Greenpeace in the first place, but also what got you to Japan, right, from Finland. So could you give us a bit of background here in as much detail or as little detail as you feel comfortable? And I'll definitely ask extra questions if there's not enough details. Anyways.
So if I start from very beginning, when I was, I think 9 years old, I started playing a PlayStation game from Japan called...
I wonder which one it is.
Here it comes. It's Final Fantasy VII,
All right.
where the heroes are, well, they are eco-terrorists,
Sure.
which of course I do not approve of, but they were fighting for the planet, and they were talking about how the planet is dying, and they were trying to do something about it. And even though I do not approve of the method, I think it planted a seed. So when I heard a lot in school about environmental issues and had the chance to talk to some NGOs in Finland who were working on them, and heard about what's happening with climate change and how urgently we need to stop it, I came to decide that I want to work on that. I studied environmental policy in university, and it was always very clear to me from there that I really want to work on this. I came to work in environmental NGOs. So basically, I've been there for my whole career until now.
NGOs, you mean like other than Greenpeace as well, or?
Yes, I have worked with another Finnish NGO. One of them is called Friends of the Earth, which some of the listeners may know as well. And then I switched to Greenpeace Finland. And there I heard that Greenpeace Japan is wanting to start a coal campaign. And because I had worked on coal in Finland, and also because I had that interest in Japan, I thought that I could bring those two kind of passions together by coming here.
All right. It's very interesting. So you had told me about being a fan of Final Fantasy VII. Last time we kind of talked about our common like geek side, but I had yet to hear about that the part where you were impacted by the story of the game. That's very interesting. What does Japan, or maybe Tokyo, like what you know of Japan so far, and maybe what you knew of Japan before coming, what does it represent for you? What is appealing to you?
Yeah, so I started as quite young from games and anime and manga, and somehow it resonated with me. And then through the years, the interest got a bit like wider and deeper, I guess. So I became interested in Buddhism, at some point also the Japanese history, philosophy, art, especially haiku poetry, and iaido, the art of sword drawing. So I don't know, it's sometimes difficult to pinpoint what inside all of that culture is the thing that really resonates, but somehow it resonates. So yeah, I don't know what's the core of it all, but somehow it speaks to me and feels like home, I guess.
Oh, really? It does feel like home. Yeah. That's very interesting. Are you how to say this? What is your assessment of this first year in Japan as far as like expectations you would have? Was it your first time in the country, or did you travel before, by the way?
I lived in Japan for 3 months 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I already knew what to expect of Tokyo. But even that first time when I came here, I wasn't really surprised by almost anything. So I guess I had watched enough anime and read enough books. So I had some expectations, and most of them I think were met.
Okay. Interesting. Not surprised, huh? I can see how it's great that you're bringing this up like with a smile, and it sounds very positive. To me, what I really enjoy in the past few years is when I had family or friends coming and seeing through their eyes for the first time things that I'm totally used to. It's not that I'm jaded, I'm used to, right? I'm used to a lot of things in Japan, not to everything, like far from it, but used enough that it's not like the me from 10 years ago would be, how could you just like not react to this, right? And so I don't know if we're talking about the same thing here, but if to some extent it is. So coming here for the first time, it already be, to put a negative word here, but just for fun, like jaded, it's a bit sad to me, but interesting. All right.
Oh, there are definitely things that I find uncomfortable. Like I'm not always happy about how things are here. For example, I do really find the morning train very uncomfortable.
Oh, yes. Are you taking it again? Because for the listeners here, you posted on Facebook a few weeks ago, I think, very uncomfortable experience in the morning train. And so you were like, maybe I'll go by foot, which is about an hour, if I remember right. What happens?
I went back to the trains. Yeah, I was assuming that would be really difficult for me before I came here, because I think I'm very Finnish in the sense that I I don't want people to come so close to me, and I want to have my personal space. But still, I got used to it so fast that I'm every morning just, I'll just live through it, and then I forget about it.
I see. The Japanese people, especially in this part of Japan, are also very, the normal distance between people is way, like there's more distance between people than in where I come from, in Europe. And that's not to talk about more like southern countries like Spain, etc. Right? So the train situation is probably uncomfortable for every Japanese. It's just like everyone is like squeezed together, but everyone is alone squeezed together, right? Yeah. So you don't make eye contact at all. There's like, I'm alone with everyone else around me, right? But yeah, it can be definitely, plus there's been all those cases of inappropriate behavior that can be very traumatic and that can go both ways, right? Because I've heard stories of people being accused falsely, and this can be terribly devastating for their reputation, etc. So if you can avoid the morning rush hour and I don't know if there's a rush hour at the evenings, but it's better, I guess. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty happy to be walking 13 to 14 minutes to get to my job. So I'm definitely not missing the train. But I've experienced a bit of it in early mornings, and it is an experience. So you are back to the train.
I am back to the train, but somehow it's not so bad after all.
Okay.
I usually just listen to some music that is energizing for me, and focus on that and kind of shut everything else out, or maybe I review kanji or something like that to make it useful.
Sure. All right. So a positive year overall. That's great to hear. I say we because as foreigners living in Japan, when you talk about this with others, sometimes, if not oftentimes, you hear more negative than positive. So it's very refreshing to hear positive, especially after a year. Usually it goes like kind of up and down and up and down. So what kind of things are you doing here in Japan, apart from your job, obviously, that you are looking forward to before living here, or that you didn't even think of before coming here, but you just like, it's an opportunity and you started doing it? What are those things that you're really enjoying about being here that you couldn't do elsewhere?
Well, of course, the studying Japanese here is more effective than studying it in Finland because there's more chances to use it. So that's something that is really fun. And I'm the kind of person who enjoys like self-improvement. So it's really fun to follow my own, like how I'm progressing with studies. So that's really fun thing that I do not every day, but many times a week as kind of a hobby also, but also of course improvement for work-related stuff. Another thing that I've enjoyed more than I expected, even in Finland, I was a big fan of this one series of Japanese comics, but I think I was more casual about it. But now that I'm here and have the opportunity to go to all these events related to that series, I think I have become even more otaku than before.
All right.
So really enjoying all the events, like art exhibitions, musicals, things like that, about that specific series that I enjoy.
All right, that's cool. It's definitely not something you can experience everywhere. Although Japanese pop culture in main cities in the Western world is very prevalent as well. So you can have like I studied in Paris, and they have the Paris Japan Expo, where you can find like even more hardcore fans than you would find in Japan. Or it's like maybe you I don't know if you're still practicing any kind of iaido martial arts.
Not at the moment.
Yeah, I used to do even more traditional swordmanship, Japanese swordmanship discipline, like school for a long time, for like about 13 years. And you would find more people wanting to dive into this really hardcore than Japanese people. Just because that's the way it is. I mean, well, the world is bigger than just Japan, and also when it's pop culture, like it's pop culture. So in Japan, you have a lot of people enjoying it. When it comes to like old-fashioned like culture, like apart from very few people in Japan, most people don't care about it. So you can still experience all that outside, but being in Japan is very special, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's always fun to get those live experiences rather than always like relying on like reports on the internet or DVDs or whatever. So
great, that's great. Now, since my podcast is based around the idea of plant-based lifestyle, and we haven't talked about it yet, and I met you like a lot of my guests at a Tokyo Vegan meetup, you're vegan, right?
Yes.
I believe. Can you walk us through what brought you to a plant-based lifestyle and from as early as you can remember?
So my family in Finland was very following a very traditional Finnish diet, which means meat and potatoes. So I also, when I was a kid, I used to like that. So I didn't have any, I didn't naturally feel averse to meat. But when I was in high school, I think, I had that opportunity to go to a camp that was organized by NGOs. And one of the NGOs who was involved was an animal rights group. And I went to talk with them. I don't remember why, but I had some materials from them that were kind of showing and explaining some like basic facts and details about animal agriculture. And I think that made a big impact. Like I didn't know beforehand that it was like that. So I started thinking about it. Also, there was a person in my school who I thought was really cool, who was vegan. So that also planted some thoughts. In college, I participated in a philosophy course where I read this one book about animal ethics. And it really made me think that there doesn't seem to be like a very logical model for ethics that gives a justification for eating or killing animals. So
what was that book? Can I just ask?
It's a Finnish book.
Okay.
I cannot remember.
All right.
But yeah, I think quite soon after like reading that book and getting the initial information, I decided to become vegetarian and very soon after that vegan. So yeah, after I heard, I decided quite quickly that I want to change how I behave.
All right. Interesting. And how was that experience within, like, in relationship with your social circle at the time? Like, when you had those questions, were you like just keeping them to yourself, or did you talk with some one in your family about them, or etc.? What was the environment there for you?
I think it wasn't like very warmly welcomed in my family. Maybe there was an issue of it's like being troublesome to make different kind of dish for one person. So quite soon I started making my own. So I did have to like not fight, but debate about it a bit at home.
Is that after you change your diet yourself, or is it like before? Is it like, did you not reach out to anyone really about this issue, about animal condition, etc., with anyone before actually acting upon?
No,
that?
I decided, and I told my family that now I'm doing this, and then we had the discussion afterwards. Yeah, I didn't really try to connect with people beforehand or ask anyone's permission. So I decided I want to do this, and then saw how I can do it.
And so you are still living with, like, not on your own at that time when you changed diets then?
Yeah, I was living at home at that time.
All right. And how about, like, because you said there was someone in your school before that you thought was cool and was vegan, and had you some friends or even acquaintances around you, like as a teenager, with whom you discussed those things, or?
Not really, and I think I never even talked to that person who I thought was cool. At that time, people were just starting to write, not blogs, but like online journals. So I think I poured a lot of my thinking there, like just trying to get out what I'm thinking. But I think my friends didn't really respond to that. And at some point I got feedback that they weren't really happy to hear those messages from me. So I didn't, and probably I was really annoying. Like I was very angry and disappointed, and kind of like, why isn't everyone doing this? So not very understanding to where other people were at or what they were thinking. So I very well understand if they thought I was annoying. But yeah, I didn't have friends who were doing the same thing. So, but I also didn't feel very lonely about it at that point. Like to me, it was enough that I had decided, and I felt that I was doing the right thing. So that was enough for me.
Okay. Did you turn vegan like maybe early 20s or something like that?
A bit earlier.
A bit earlier?
Like
okay.
15, 16.
Okay.
I'm
so,
not quite sure.
Because you said college. And so I thought like university college.
Anyway, I'm losing track, but I think it's like 15 years ago.
Okay, yeah. So that's definitely very different than early 20s as far as like social relationships, right, with parents, etc. I see. And how has it been being vegan, like in Finland? I don't know, where were you living in Finland? In a big city, or?
Not a big one, but a city when I started. And then for my studies, I moved to a bit bigger city that was more progressive and had like vegetarian restaurants at least. And then I moved to the capital city, Helsinki, which is already quite good about vegan like products and options in the restaurants.
All right.
But definitely there's been a big change during the time when I started being vegan and when I was still living in Finland.
Yes.
So it's been a really positive trend and an upward trend, I think. So that's been really encouraging.
I see. And so you studied in that a bit bigger city, and then you were at that time. So you were studying environmental policy, which one would imagine would have quite a few people studying that who are interested in everything related to, of course, environment, and thus maybe animal agriculture, etc. Right? Did you meet anyone in that circle that had the similar thoughts than you about eating animals?
I feel like there must have been at least one or a couple of other vegans besides me, but it wasn't really a major topic for discussion. And I remember being disappointed many times by not finding more vegans. So that was a bit sad, I think. I think it was more when I started working in environmental NGOs, where I think people have more that kind of like campaigner mindset or the mindset that they have a responsibility and they can change and that we can like do some collective action about it.
That's when you started like connecting with more people.
Yes, but even after that, I often feel like I don't have many vegan friends. So I think often I'm the only one in my social circle.
I see.
Not the only one anymore, but it's been like that for a very long time.
I see. I haven't been vegan that long, so I really can't compare with your experience. I experienced, though, what I did experience is being the annoying vegan. When I think it's when you're still, and I'm still pretty new to it, so I don't think it's over yet, but very emotionally passionate about it. Not that you become less passionate, you just become smarter, or like you can take more distance with your feelings, right? And so when you're more passionate, like more like unreasonably so, I would say, passionate about it, and you don't have on top of that enough knowledge to really phrase what you feel in words that will reach others, you just throw words that will annoy others, and so you're not helping anyone, not even yourself. And so that I can relate to pretty well. And as you can see from my t-shirt, I'm openly showing that I'm vegan, not all the time, not at every venue. I tend to say, usually I say that at venues that are full of vegans, I don't wear vegan apparel because why? And when I go out dancing or doing some acro or whatever, I will more likely wear that so that people can ask me questions about it. Going back to what you said about at university, maybe if you or someone else that was vegan had friends, not food, t-shirts, and the like, I would be easier to connect. But it could also be a sign of like, don't approach me, I'm vegan. So I'm not saying you missed an opportunity there, but it definitely helps, you know that joke? Do you know that joke? How can you tell someone's vegan?
They will tell you.
Yeah, within 5 minutes usually, right? So the t-shirt thing, or if it's something else, the t-shirt is even like, well, you didn't even speak yet and you're vegan. That's, yeah, because on top of the t-shirt, I have the sweatshirt here. So there you go. It hasn't worked that way. That's so true. I had maybe a couple people ask me about it in a situation where I wasn't expecting it. So yeah, I guess it's a double-edged sword, but yeah. And so you're working in NGOs in Finland, and then you got this opportunity to come here to Japan. How has it been being vegan the few years you stayed? So you already said something about it, like you were working in Helsinki the whole time in Finland?
Yes.
Okay. So that was pretty comfortable then, I guess, as a vegan?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Big change coming to Japan?
Yeah. I think it was especially difficult 3 years ago when I was here for a short time.
Oh, yeah.
When I couldn't read any kanji yet.
Yeah.
And since the Japanese products in supermarkets don't have any English labeling, so then you just cannot buy anything that has a label because you cannot check. Well, of course, now you can use Google Translate, which is a lot better these years, so that's helpful. So yeah, at that point it was a little bit limited, so a little bit annoying, but not anything that made me question, like, do I want to take a break or stop? I know a lot of people seem to do that when they come to Japan, but I never considered that. But now, since I moved here about a year ago, it's been a lot easier now that I can read some more kanji and can like identify more products in shops that I can eat. Also, there's a lot more vegan restaurants than like 3 years ago. So I think, well, especially in Tokyo, there's not that much difficulty in about the actual eating. So I think that's really nice. And I was even a little bit surprised that it was that easy, because so many people have been saying that it's so difficult and I had to stop being vegan when I came to Japan. But I haven't really experienced that. But what has been like mentally uncomfortable is, I feel like I have gone back in time. Like for example, in Finland and in some other Western countries, I think the awareness of animal rights issues and veganism and what kind of food it's possible to make as vegan versions is a lot higher than in Japan. So then coming here and seeing how so many people are not really even thinking about what they are eating, or that they are eating something that used to be a living being, and not really aware of the animal rights issues that are involved in animal agriculture. I think experiencing that again is a bit depressing. So yeah, I think that's been the more difficult part about living in Japan now.
Yeah, I think that might be something that explains also why some, usually it's foreigners, I think, choose to give up at least partly their lifestyle as a vegan when they start living here. Two, it really depends on what's your lifestyle to begin with, right? As far as like food habits, right? If you're someone who's whole food plant-based like me, well, you have to make up with very expensive produce and limited choices in some of them. But basically, you don't have to read any labels. You just buy the produce, right? If you're someone who wants to do something more, let's say, transformed products already, etc., then yes, you need to read labels, etc. But more than that, and you said it yourself, it can be pretty easy to not eat any animal products, unless you're someone who's always on the go. You're very social, but not with Tokyo Vegan Meetup people who are vegan, but very like with like a range of different people, and you're not someone who wants to plan your next meal in advance. Then it becomes hell. Like, you're hungry, what are your options? There's only like this and this open, or you're hungry, or and it's time to go eat out with friends. And what are your options? Like, there's way more vegan-friendly options now to eat out in Tokyo, but you need to want to go there, right? You can't just say, "Oh, wait, we're gonna eat out right now." You're sure? Well, there's something like within a kilometer. That's obvious because there's options everywhere in Tokyo. No, that's not yet the case. You still need to have a group of people who are like, sure, you're vegan. It's not just a diet choice. It's like based on values. So for us, food is food. We can eat something else when you're not around. Let's go where it makes you comfortable, right? Which I think is the way it should be. All right. And I realize people who are not vegan like might feel threatened by that because they might feel like it's unfair, or that you need to, both the vegan and the non-vegan, cross half of the distance and meet both ways, like meet halfway. But it's not even ground, right? It's not like it's values against just food preferences, right? And some vegans are just about health, so there it's different, right? But when it's values, it's not like, okay, I'm against you, a super extreme example, abusing people, but I'm going to meet you halfway. I'm going to abuse a bit of people because, right? That doesn't work. Like, when you talk about values, it's white, black or white, right? Yeah. There might be spectrums in some areas, but here is very black or white. And so in that sense, being a vegan, depending on your lifestyle before you came to Japan, can be very difficult, whether you read Japanese or not. So I do understand. I do not especially approve of, but I think it's a case-by-case thing. So if I meet someone and he or she tells me I was vegan, I came here, I'm now getting dairy, or I'm a pescatarian or whatever, just because it's impossible for me to do this, I will think it's totally possible. You just choose not to, right? But I'm not going to say they're wrong. I'd say to go back to the policy and individual choice thing, let's make the environment change, right? Or let's put our money where it needs to be to make those changes happen. So eating out in vegan places and vegan friendly places will definitely send a signal that those are welcome and that we want more of them, etc. Yeah. So it's super great to hear that you didn't find it difficult. I'm curious though about what you're eating here then. If you're not a crazy person like me who's only buying produce and putting them in a bowl and then taking pictures of that for his Instagram, which is not the best publicity for like vegan food because people might think vegan people are just eating like me, which is not true. What are you living on, surviving on here?
Yeah, so there's not really a vegan restaurant close enough to my office that I would like to use it. Or I don't feel like I have the time for it. So basically I make my bento every day.
Okay.
Well, I don't cook every day because I'm too lazy to cook every day. So I think my habit is to try to cook as much as I can during the week and
batch cooking.
Yeah, so that it can last me at least through like 3 or 4 days, and then I'm energized again enough that I can cook again. But yeah, I don't have the patience to do that every day.
I see. So it is, but still, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, right? But what kind of food is it then? Because if you're buying stuff that has labels and that you need to like decipher to know if there's any like hidden products in it, etc., are you cooking like more things that are closer to what you ate in Finland, or is it like more veganized Japanese stuff? Or
I think pretty much the same as what I was eating in Finland, maybe with addition of few Japanese recipes that I try to learn while I'm here. I think most of the time when I cook, I also use like whole foods. So I think the label problem comes more with like snacks or candy.
Yeah,
I like sweet stuff, so that's where I have some difficulty sometimes finding stuff. But yeah, mostly it's pretty much the same as before. I think I eat a lot of like salads, different mixtures of rice, tofu, vegetables, some like noodle woks, pastas, soups, that kind of stuff.
I see. So it is very simple, but way more complex than what I do, which is great. I mean, for me too, it's two, I don't know, but for me it is about being on the right spot of the spectrum between complexity and habits. And the more habit-based it is, the less I have to think about it, and I can think about something else. So I can revolve around the same basic foods and then combine them differently. And but I don't cook per se. I have a gas stove, but it's not connected to the gas for a reason I won't enter it here. So I can't even do pastas at home right now. But yeah, all right. And have you in your so we talked about the Japanese mindset regarding animals, and also how you never really had, for a long time, strong connections with other vegans. Has that changed being here in Japan?
Yeah, here I have started thinking about veganism again a lot more. In Finland, I could go like long periods of time without like thinking about it at all. Like I wasn't actively thinking that I'm vegan. I am vegan, even though I was vegan, of course. But it was something so easy that I could just kind of forget about it. But here it's not obvious. So I have started thinking about it again more, and it's become kind of more active part of my identity.
Yeah.
So that has also made me want to reach out to vegan people more and make more vegan friends, because here it can be, I think, very lonely sometimes. So yeah, I've been also going to those Tokyo vegan meetups, and actually it's been really, I think, empowering to see that there are so many people who are thinking about the same thing, and so many different kind of people from different backgrounds. So yeah, that's definitely been fun, and also like sparking new ideas. Like, is there something more that I could be doing? Not just being vegan, but also doing some activism or something about it.
All right, that's interesting. That leads us to an interesting road here, because one would argue maybe that looking at what you're doing already professionally, you're doing a lot to make the world better as far as you understand it, which is more than most people can say about their job, right? And not to say that their job doesn't have value, right? Social value, etc., right? But still, it's not the same, right? And so, on top of being like, just imagine, like, picture this being working for Greenpeace, trying to make the world move towards a more renewable energy solutions, and being vegan yourself, being vegan activist on top of that. I mean, it's awesome, but and I think those I can relate to feeling like you want to do more. But is there a part of you that views this as where you must find your peace? Because, you know, there's each time you increase your standards towards more, let's say, earth-friendly living style, right? You always find someone who's higher than you in some aspects. If they're a nice person, they will be super nice with you. If they're not, they will be looking at you like they know better, etc., right? Or anything in between. And I think making peace with yourself is very important as well, right? With actions that you know not to be the best for the planet, but hey, you have 24 hours in a day and limited amount of energy, etc. Where do you draw that line? If it exists at all?
Yeah, I think it's a constant like struggle. Like, I'm always having this discussion with myself, like where is the balance, and I'm not sure where it is. But I'm always very inspired to see people who are doing like climate or animal rights or any other kind of activism on top of their like work. I think it's very admirable that a lot of people have the energy and passion to do that on top of their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So I really respect that, and I also want to be like that. But yeah, of course, then it's like a question of how to what point can you push yourself? Because I'm also very aware that if you just push yourself too much, well, you don't want to get into a burnout or something, because then it's all, you cannot do anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think sometimes I have been less good at finding that balance and might have pushed myself too far. But currently I feel I'm in a good place and have good energy and have that capacity to do a bit more. For me, it helps that I'm pretty good at taking my own time and kind of protecting my own limits. Like, for example, I know that I need a lot of time every week and preferably every day to be alone, to recharge and kind of energize again, and just like read manga or read books, listen to my fun musical music, to kind of reset.
I see.
So, but I have something like that in my life that is very like fun and energizing, and I do take care to take time for it. So yeah, I am planning on not burning myself out.
I hope you won't. And obviously, to me as well, with this podcast, for example, right, that I did to scratch my own itch to begin with, but definitely, hopefully, in the near future, it will reach more people than it does now. And even now, I don't know if maybe someone who listened to it got influenced in the direction I would see as positive. If that happened, then it's worth it to me as well, right? But definitely wanting to do more, I can totally relate to that. I discussed a lot a few years ago with someone who was kind of in a life crisis. I don't know if that life crisis is over yet. Older than me, a good friend, and he pushed me towards reassessing a lot of things in my life at the time. And at the time, I was very much yet into leisures that didn't involve anyone else really, like whether it's games or movies or shows. It could be anything, right? And he would qualify that with a smile and not condemning me, right? Like, kind of, I understand where that comes from. In Japanese, we would use the word genjitsu tohi, which means escape from reality, right? And you can see that in extremes when you watch a documentary about, for example, hikikomori, like those youngs who are sometimes less young people, whether it's in Japan or elsewhere, that just, I'm going to use the word choose here, but some might argue it's not a choice. It's a result of a lot of things to not interact with anything but fictional universes. And usually that involves staying put in their room or whatever. And I'm totally not saying that has anything to do with you or even with me for that matter. But this is something that I won't say I struggle with, but it's a question that is on my mind often because my lifestyle has changed so much for me the past few years, from those kind of hobbies to my hobbies. I have them. They're totally not activist based, where unless I wear an animal right t-shirt at a salsa event, which I did, doesn't work that much. They're based around connection with people now. And that's where I find value. And basically, I still read mangas. I actually have one here. I'm reading JoJo Bizarre Adventure right now because of what I talked to you about the other day. But I read it on the go, or I read it like 5 minutes before sleeping. Then I put it away. I find it difficult for me to really spend a lot of time on one such activity that doesn't make me be creative. With my podcast, for example, editing the podcast, it's on my leisure time, but I'm doing it for kind of purpose, right? Not just to have fun. And when it's only for fun, then I like it to be with others so that I can find meaning there. That's my take on things right now. And I talked for 3 minutes there just to, I'm wondering if you needing that alone time, which is totally natural as far as I can tell, for recharging your batteries. You use the word to recharge, right? Is it related to what you would express as being you fighting against the norm of the world that doesn't really care about a lot of things you care about, whether it's animal rights or everything related to environment? You're like, hey, why aren't you getting this? Right. And so you have to spend a lot of energy there. Is it related to that?
I'm not sure. In some cases, yes. I do feel sometimes that when there are difficulties to connect with people, of course, it takes more energy.
Yeah.
And then you just need to be alone to cope with that. But I feel like it just might be my basic personality or temperament or whatever. It's just something that suits me, and I think it was already there before I became like vegan or activist and started having those like moments of disconnection or struggles with other people in the sense of values or that kind of thing.
Okay. All right.
But even like sometimes when I say that I need that alone time and I want to be home and I don't want to see anyone, but I might still be like chatting with people about the series of comic that I'm reading, that I might still want to have that connection with other people, but at the same time I just want to be alone at home and don't have to worry about what I'm wearing or having to go somewhere. So it's kind of getting the best of the both worlds at the same time.
All right, I see. Yeah, no, definitely. I guess it's really how to say it. Depending on what kind of where you come from in your social interactions, the reason why I was more inclined to spend my free time on whether it was reading mangas or something else for long stretches of time or playing games, especially like until late in my 20s, it's probably to do with how personally, I'm not saying that's the case for other people, but social interactions I would have been hurt in the past by that, not remembering, like there's a guy I follow that I always bring up when we talk about either protein or muscles or whatever to that and veganism, like Nimai Delgado he's a professional bodybuilder. He has a podcast, and several times on his podcast, I heard him say, that's not from him, but he's quoting, like, being an adult is basically trying to cope with all the traumas you experienced until that point of time in your life. And so I think that in my case, it's related to that. And it's also because I spend so much time personally, I wasn't having a job in which I would express or represent values I hold dear in my 20s. So having spent all that bunch of time doing things that I don't think are not valuable, but not nearly as much valuable as what I do now, I'm very motivated to kind of learn and grow towards someone I would qualify as being more, a good person or someone I can be like just proud of, So yes, I think drawing the line between, allowing yourself to rest basically. And I think you having that is very healthy because burnout is a real thing, not only for people like working jobs that are not related really to their values, but especially for people in NGOs where you start that job because it's something you believe in, and then everything, like every free time you have, basically you feel like you could do more. That's a very dangerous, it's a slippery slope.
And I see it a lot in NGOs that people are having a lot of difficulty to drawing that line. And I have seen more of that difficulty here in Japan as well. So that's also something that I'm thinking about, that I think Finland and the Nordic countries have a bit better culture about that, even though even in there's a lot of discussion that there's too much pressure on people and people are thinking too much about like performing rather than like resting or enjoying their lives or thinking about what's actually valuable for them. So even in Nordic countries, there's a issue about that, and not everyone is happy about the situation. But in comparison, I think the situation there is a bit healthier than in Japan. So it's also something that I'm trying to hold on to, even though I'm here, and a value that I'm trying to. I'm not sure if advocate is the right word, but kind of
well, represent
yeah. and show us an example that it's also possible to live like this.
Yeah, to be like a fighter during most time of the day, and then just be a not criticizing her manga otaku for a few hours every day, and one fuels the other. Well, I'm not sure about the advocating fueling the manga loving, but definitely one goes with the other here. And if someone comes to you and say, like, instead of reading those or whatever, spending your money or time there, why don't you do this or this or that to help more people? It's like, as I said before, you always find people who do something more extreme than what you do, right? Well, I mean, unless you're the guy on the top, but yeah. And so I think it's very healthy for you to be aware and to be able to draw the line there. And to go back to, you said it was more prevalent in Japan, people being over invested in their work, and like when they work in NGOs and things. I think it might be related to the fact that to be working in such an environment in the first place in Japan, you have to stand out more so than in the West. In the West, difference is less traumatic. Being different is a bit less traumatic than being different in Japan. And therefore, you have to be, quote unquote, stronger in Japan to stand out and get involved in NGOs. And therefore, you'll be a bit more extreme personality as far as like managing your own emotions and drive to work for the cause you believe in than in the West. In the West, you can find more casual people who will probably be working their ass off during a certain amount of time, and then now it's time, now I'm going to chill and have a drink and watch Netflix, right? Whereas in Japan, it would be like maybe thinking about it and then just going back to work or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analysis of it.
All right. Well, I'm happy to hear you're not part of the overworking crowd. I mean,
I'm trying. Sometimes I fail too.
Okay, fair enough. I definitely can't say I'm overworking right now, but right now, I mean, this school year, I've been having a very balanced life overall. So for me, it's working there, but I still feel like I'm not doing enough, to be honest. Yeah. This podcast, if it was like just having much more impact that I could feel or measure or see myself, I would probably feel happier with just doing it. But yeah, like taking part in Cube of Truth, even here or there or something like that, it's something that I have on my mind. And then I think I'll probably try soon, but I keep on pushing it like to next weekend and next weekend. And
yeah, I'm also still trying to figure out what the doing more would actually mean. And then for me, it's always a discussion with myself, like, if I want to do more, then what do I want to do more on?
Yeah. Like, choosing what's the most. Yeah.
And so far, for me, the fighting against climate change is the top priority. But then I'm always feeling bad that I should be doing more for the animal rights cause as well. So right. Yeah, it's a continuous struggle, and I don't expect it to end.
Well, as long as you can manage, I think life is not. It's a process, right? It's an ongoing process. It's not about finding the solution.
Yeah.
So it's about how you cope with it being a process.
Yeah.
And being comfortable in change and in a never-ending, I have to figure out how to make things work right now, right? If you're thinking it's going to be at some point, everything is going to have its answer and you're going to be like, without any change happening, it's not going to happen, I think. So about going back quite a few years in the past year, so playing Final Fantasy VII, got to start thinking about things related to ecology. But has your like kind of choice of career or like the kind of job you wanted to do always been since then related to the environment, or did you have anything else you wanted to do? So for example, if you didn't do this job right now and you could do something else, what would be your second choice?
So before getting my like proper climate awakening, I was thinking I want to be a psychologist. Currently, I'm not sure if that would have worked out well. I think currently I'm quite impatient with people's problems. And I don't know, maybe if I would have taken the training, I would be more patient and more understanding of it, I hope. But currently I feel maybe it was good that I didn't become a psychologist. Yeah, I sometimes get thoughts that if climate change wasn't there, maybe I would have liked to pursue some arts. I used to dance for a really long time. I did Oriental dance for a really long time. At some point I was in a dance group that did dance hall, which was really fun, but not something that I'm missing all that much anymore. I did some hip hop at some point, like street kind of dances. I quit dancing when I started doing Iaido. Somehow that resonated with me on a, I think, more deeper level. So even though it was a big change to stop dancing after such a long time, and I was wondering if I would miss it a lot. And sometimes I do, but it hasn't been too bad. So I guess Iaido was in the end kind of even the better fit for me. And that's something that I really miss currently. But I haven't been able to find a school in Japan that does the exact same style. And I went to see another dojo that did a little bit different style. But unfortunately, the level was a bit different than it was in Finland, where we had a Japanese teacher as well. And in any case, I made the decision about my priorities that while I'm here, I want to spend the time on studying Japanese, because that's also what will be useful for my work. So yeah, currently I'm not doing Iaido either.
All right. And what would be, like, this is not totally related, but what would be the most positive thing for you that becoming vegan brought to your life? And it could be anything from living according to some of your values to health to anything. How has it been working for you?
Yeah, I think for me the most important thing is living according to my values and not having to feel bad about it. I do have other things that I feel bad about, like I'm not doing enough for this or that. But at least I don't have to feel bad about what I'm eating. So I think that's really a relief that I do think about quite often. And most of the time I'm pretty pragmatic, I think, but I have this one thought that kind of resonated with me that is, I think, quite romantic in a way. Sometimes I don't really relate to some of the vegan catchphrases, but one of them that I do is something like, my body is a garden, not a graveyard. So for me it feels really good to know that no dead animals are part of my body, and I'm not in touch with that. It's not part of my life.
I see.
I'm only eating plants.
I see. This is interesting to me because I've discussed, not in much detail, but still with people about veganism and the idea of life and what life is. And I've listened to a lot of videos and podcasts, etc., on the topic. And I'm curious about your take on, if you say my body's a garden, not a graveyard, there's a line you have to draw between what you consider something that dies that is then, how to say this? So basically plants, animals, right? Here the dichotomy or the differences between the two. Where do you draw the line personally? What's your view about plant life, basically, there?
I don't think about it so much in the context of veganism, but in other terms, I love plants. I would love to make my home a jungle. Like I think there can never be like too many plants. But my current understanding of like plant physiology is such that I don't feel any like moral issue eating them. I do sometimes feel like a emotional issue eating them. Like I love plants. I sympathize with them. So sometimes it does feel a bit, it's such a shame that I have to eat this lovely, beautiful thing. But if I think about it from like a moral point of view, then it's not an issue for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people who feel morally challenged eating plants. If I'm not mistaken, I think there are some religions, if I'm not wrong here, that try to go only with what falls out of a tree so that you don't have to cut the life out of it, right? I think you have to be both pragmatic and realistic in your approach of what it means to be a living being on Earth and how you have an impact, right? If you really have a strong will to have zero impact, there's not a lot you can do, if anything at all. So I think, because that's a question that comes up quite often, like, what about the life of plants? Usually you get that from non-vegan people.
Yes.
Right. And then you can obviously say, well, you need to feed the animals that you're eating, so you're still killing more plants, so I might as well kill less plants. But I think ultimately, and again, is this totally probably an unrealistic scenario, but if tomorrow we find out that every plant is sentient and suffering, right? And what do? Well, I think you keep on eating plants because you don't have any other options, and then it's all the more reason to stop feeding cattle. But on top of that, then the moral imperative, as far as I'm concerned, and again, this is totally unrealistic and kind of sci-fi scenario, would be to find alternatives, a bit like lab-grown meat, like cell-based meat and that kind of stuff. It would be like for human ingenuity to cut through the natural order, say, screw you, natural order, I don't want to make anything suffer, I'm going to build from the scratch what I need to survive. And even if it costs culinary traditions, in the process that a lot of like yummy food disappears, I think there's a spectrum again here, would argue some people, but that would be what you would want to do. I don't think it's ever going to get there. I think we nailed pretty good what plants were experiencing or not, as far as like pain and suffering and fear and all those negative emotions that are usually the ones we want animals not to experience as much as possible, right? And that drives a lot of like vegan people to be outside of the norm in our current society. But yes, I've never thought about my tomato as being cute and having a hard time eating it. So that's the first time I hear that. It's interesting.
For me, they are very cute.
I'm not saying they're not. I love plants as well. I have a cactus at home. I chose cactus because obviously when I'm not at home for like a certain stretch of time, it survives on its own. But I've always had a quite, let's say, affection for plants overall. I'd love to have more plants at home, but living abroad is not always a good thing when you want to have such life in your apartment and you need to water them, etc. All right. Is there anything that you noticed health-wise, like going vegan, although it was a long time ago? Or has it been like beneficial overall or challenging at times?
Immediately after I became vegan, I lost a little bit of weight, but that was fine. I think there was no problem for that. I also noticed that I got some more energy, and I think I was less sleepy. I needed to sleep less. So that was something that I noticed as soon as I switched. But I have never had any health problems being vegan. And recently I got a full blood picture and looked at all the values, and everything was pretty much perfect.
Oh, great.
So I was really happy to notice that, even though I'm actually not very careful about health. Sometimes of course, when I did become vegan, I did read something about nutrition and okay, I have to take B12 and that kind of stuff. So I do take multivitamin tabs for kind of just in case, but I'm not very careful about have I eaten enough of this and have I eaten enough of that. I don't really think about it. So I was really happy to notice that even with this lazy approach, you can be fine.
All right, lazy, I wouldn't say so. Turning vegan, and maybe it's because it happened in a country where it was less exceptional, let's say, than in Japan, for example. But you would be surprised about how many Japanese people that at least I've talked to that didn't even look into nutrition, right? Becoming vegan. And for the longest time, we're not taking any supplement, for example, B12, and apparently they're doing good. So they might get their B12 from somewhere else, or their reserves are not yet depleted, or maybe this is just a big kind of hoax that in a few years will be revealed. I don't know. It's always hard for me to be 100% convinced that it is totally true. The B12 thing, I totally believe it is, right? So listeners, please do take your B12 if you're vegan. And if you're not vegan too, actually. Or just get your blood work done and get your B12 levels analyzed, etc. But a lot of people I talked with here, mostly Japanese, are just not looking into it, right? And they're just because they're becoming vegan usually because of ethical reasons. And I think they're just maybe struggling enough to just get that going on, or whatever the reasons. So for you, it's obvious, and that's great that it was the case, and it's awesome that your results are good. You got your B12, iron, and everything checked too?
Yeah. Yes, and it was all fine.
All right. Can I ask you what was the context there? Did you go to get your blood work done out of your own initiative, or was it ready to work?
Kind of in the mid-ground.
The mid-ground. Okay. No, because I'm asking because I get my blood work done every year at school, at my work, beginning of the school year in August. But they don't check for the things I'm looking for, right? They check the basic things. And so they won't tell you anything about B12, and they just don't check it, right? So I have to go to this doctor. I've been twice to him and tell him I'm vegan, which obviously in Japan, if you go to a Japanese doctor, it's already interesting enough an interaction there, etc. Right? So I have to ask about those elements to be checked for, and in your case, since you got those checked as well, I was curious if it was.
Yeah, I think I also had the discussion with that doctor that I am vegan, and it was a Japanese doctor, but actually their feedback was that they have seen a lot of vegan patients who have like great blood values. So I didn't have to like debate on the
All
issue
right, awesome.
with that person. So that was nice.
That's cool. If it's okay, I might ask you later to give me the details about where you got that done. That might be helpful for some listeners that would be living in Tokyo, because I recommended to a friend recently the place I've been going to, which has been recommended to me by the nurse of my school. But obviously no one, like the nurse of my school is not vegan. She knows I am, but the doctor, he's on the older spectrum of life, and it's a small clinic, and I think I'm probably the only vegan he's ever met or stuff like that. So he gave me the look, you know. But then he looked at me, and I don't look weak nor especially in need of animal protein. So I don't think he tried to, well, he didn't try to convince me, but definitely probably my physical appearance helped there. But great to hear that you're in great health, because I was actually going to ask about B12, but now you answered for me already, so I have to go to the next question. What is your typical day here? Like, so you've been here for a year, and when you work, apart from the morning rush hour train experience, what is a typical Hanna day like here?
Okay. My typical day is that I wake up at 6. And then in the morning, I never want to rush to work. I want to do something fun before work and enjoy life. So I have a nice breakfast. I don't want to rush with it. I will do something related to Prince of Tennis, my favorite comic series, before going to work. So at work, I do the Greenpeace coal campaigning stuff, which is often very busy and hectic.
Sorry to interrupt, but by busy and hectic, so I mean, I guess there's a variety of things you do, but overall, what's the most common kind of work you do? Like, is it like reading a lot of papers, or?
Yeah, reading a lot of articles, what's happening in the world, check emails, who has some like request for me, do I need to provide some information for someone, a lot of meetings, planning what we are doing, what we want to do next, how we should react to some like new developments, do we put out a press release or whatever. So yeah, the days at work go past so quickly. But it's a lot of fun. I really like my work, and the office is great, and the people are great. So that's really a nice part of my day. Then I basically return home, have dinner, do more Prince of Tennis stuff, study Japanese, read some books, go to sleep, do the same thing again.
All right.
Well, I do sometimes, a few times a week, go running. I think it's really important to have time when you're offline and not sitting on front of the computer.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
So to be unconnected, also from other people, to be with your own thoughts and just move your body. I think that's good and important.
Yeah, it's very, I think in recent months and years overall, I've been very interested in everything that, because people talk about lifestyles, and everyone can choose his own lifestyle to some extent, etc. What works for you, blah, blah. But I think there's a lot of things you can't escape, like that is based on how we came to be as a species. And so we're not just like blank slates when we're born, that can do whatever we want and thrive. We have to be following a certain set of rules. Like, it's obvious about diet, for example, right? People can't just live off ice cream and be healthy and full of energy, right? You can't. There's things you can't escape. Nature has done things very smartly, that you enjoy eating a lot of the foods that you're supposed to eat, right? But then human ingenuity came in and made a lot of foods that we enjoy eating that's not good for us to thrive. And that's true for a lot of things. Like, to go back to my past, I used to love playing solo video games, but if I was doing only that, then like, unfortunately, a lot of young and less young people, you end up being disconnected with others, and that doesn't work as well. So taking the time to not be only in front of your computer or doing such things and then running or moving your body in a way, I think it's very smart, it's very healthy. Even when it's not your favorite thing of the day, I think not doing it for a while, you definitely feel how it impacts negatively your life if you don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that last year when I was focusing a lot on work and studying and reading. So all kinds of interesting intellectual stuff, but not taking care to do exercise. And I was having a lot of fun and enjoying it. Like, I'm not a sports person at heart. But after doing that for a year, like avoiding exercise, it wasn't really good for my health. I really started noticing the effects. So now I'm taking care to do it again.
That's great. That's great. It's great to hear that you have this kind of a relationship with yourself, as far as like noticing that, oh, this is not working as good as I want it to, so I need to think about why that is and try to improve there. That's great.
And I have also found ways to make that, like, exercise. In this case, I do running. I have found ways to, like, make it more fun or take a new mentality to it, so that it also becomes a fun experience that I look forward to. Like, as like movement or as exercise, I used to really dislike running, but now it's really a fun time where I'm offline and I have time to think whatever I want. And another thing I like to do is write stories. So actually running is a good time to think about, like, plots and what do I want to write next.
Yeah, I think I've heard quite a lot of things about how the best activities, like intellectual activity, can have is the one you have when you're moving. Obviously, you don't want to be like overexerting yourself physically, but because then you don't have any space in your head to think. But there are like top business people. I heard it was like, this was in California though, but I guess throughout the world, who do walking meetings. So they walk and they have a meeting while walking and that kind of thing. It's not to say that you can't be super creative and successful just being not physically active, but I still think there's this optimum. You get closer to an optimal life experience if you're able to be both creative, artistically, more maybe intellectually, living according to most of your values, moving, eating things that are better than not for you, etc. Would you have a quite brief answer to how you view things evolving regarding energy-related policies and investments, whether it's in Japan or in the world? Doing the job you're doing, you definitely have a lot of knowledge that most of us don't. Is there something you see happening in the next maybe 5, 10, 20 years that you want to share?
Yeah, I think the change in that sector is really, really quick. And sometimes even like NGOs who are focusing on it, sometimes we are asking for way less than we could actually achieve. Like, sometimes the corporations manage to surprise us by moving faster than we expected. So I hope that we will see some good development. But on the other hand, of course, there are companies that are putting out statements that we're doing this great thing and we're renewing our policy. But then when a year passes, we've noticed that they haven't really done anything. So it's kind of mixed what's happening, but I'm hopeful. But the problem with climate change is that you cannot win it slowly. Like, if you're doing it too slowly, then you're just going to lose. So I'm really worried about that. So it's difficult to make a very optimistic forecast, even though I try to keep up hope.
Yeah, that's a bit what I heard listening to that podcast I just talked about, like a bit more than an hour ago, like where the author of that book was very pessimistic, but also said that he had times in his days or in his month, like in general, where he would feel more optimistic reading about this kind of technology or this kind of move towards a solution. But most of the time, overall, he would be very worried, right? I must admit, it's related a bit to what I talked about with allowing yourself to take time off those kind of issues in your life, whether it's personal issues or global issues like this, to not kind of burn out. I think people working in such environments like yourself or him, or like people working within the most, let's say, hardcore animal welfare and animal rights movements that like see footage of slaughterhouse and everything like on a daily basis, like you expose yourself to a lot of poison, like from a emotional point of view, right? You have to be very strong and resilient to begin with, but you have to recharge, right? And personally, like if I feel like everything I'm doing is not the right thing, it's going to be very challenging. So there's only so much space in my head, let's say, or in my heart to right now really assess that. But I'm definitely someone who wants to address one question after the other. So meeting someone like you who's very knowledgeable in one area of something that, well, compared to me, definitely, that I have interested in, that I know I'm not convinced yet that what I'm doing is enough, for example. It's definitely a big help, or at least something that I find very valuable, because it pushes me out of my comfort zone. And I'm someone it's not that I need. I both enjoy the process and I also feel the most alive and in a meaningful manner to be around people who inspire me. I want to be engaging with people who inspire me, not in every areas of their lives. I think, especially the older you get, the more areas of your life become very specific to yourself. And so you can't find that one person who's going to be like just doing everything better than what you want to do. But it's great to have someone around you, and it's been great meeting you and hearing about your point of view about, like, first of all, I asked you about air travel the other day. I'm not going to ask anything about it right now in the podcast because it's going to last too long, but it's definitely make me think about my options, my choices, and then that's very valuable to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just a few very rapid fire questions to finish the podcast here. So you told me you're not very good at public speaking. All right, I'm not going to ask you again the same question, although it was before the podcast, but so you're not very good at speaking.
Yeah, I have a writer's identity.
How do you feel about the year ahead?
I feel really excited. I think a lot of big things are going to happen in the climate and energy policy field, so I'm excited for the work. I'm also getting new colleagues, so that's personally exciting to look forward to. Excited to study more Japanese, excited to read more manga, go to new musicals. I want to do some train travel in Japan.
Okay.
For example, I want to go to Hagi, so that's something that I'm really looking forward to. So I think there's going to be a lot of fun stuff happening this year. But on the other hand, on the worrying side, I think we're also going to be seeing a lot more of climate change impacts, like extreme weather. Last summer was already quite tough in Japan with the heat.
Yeah.
I think that's probably very likely to continue. So that's something that I'm worrying about.
All right. Do you remember an advice you received sometime in your life that you could say it's the best one you ever got?
Yes, I remember my professor in the university saying a phrase like, if you want to work on something that's interesting for you, you have to study something that's interesting for you. A lot of people were thinking, what will be useful for me, or what will lead into a good career? Like maybe like studying media will help me get a good job. But if you're not interested in it, then it might not lead into a job that is actually good for you. So with that advice, I at least was able to trust in my own choices and my own interests. And it got me to my dream job, basically, that I'm doing right now. So,
awesome.
So I was really happy with that advice.
Great, thank you. And two more quick questions. Is there kind of a superpower-ish trait to you that your friends kind of tell you have that you can share with us?
My colleagues at the office often laughingly tell me that I'm really good at getting people around me interested in veganism.
Okay.
Or interested in Prince of Tennis. Like those are my two superpowers that I draw people in.
All right, cool. Do you have any favorite, or maybe couple or three favorite eating out places in town?
I would like to mention a couple places that have sweets. I love sweets, so the one that I'm most often going to is the Wired Bonbon in Shinjuku.
All right.
It happens to be close to my office, so it's convenient, but also I just love the parfaits and crepes and everything. It's a really good place. And another place that is really good is a very small place that does wagashi, the traditional Japanese sweets, in Sugamo, which I think is called the Harajuku for grannies. Somehow I feel very at home there. But it's a really beautiful, small little place. The menu is only in Japanese, but they have pictures, and the person who is running it is very sweet. So I would recommend taking a look at that place.
All right. Do you remember the name?
Kanro Chifukujin, I think.
Okay.
It can be found on the Happy Cow app.
All right. I'll look it up and put
Sugamo.
it in the show notes. Okay, cool. Well, anything you want to share, last words, or are we?
I think we're covered a lot.
Good, great. Well, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
Maybe sometime in the future for a second round and more details about a lot of things we didn't cover, but we did cover a lot, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ciplango podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please think about sharing it with friends and on social media. Ciplango is also on Instagram and Facebook at CIPLANTGO. There you can have a look at the latest things going on in my plant-based life in Japan. There is also an email address, ciplango@gmail.com. Feel free to send me a message, whether it's to ask a question, give me suggestions for Ciplango, or anything else. Have a great rest of the day, and until next time.